First of all, thank a very important decision taken by President Biden during his first day or second day in office. The executive order that he issued has brought back United States into the Paris Accord. This is a very important signal to the whole world. And in the United States, joining Paris Accord has a very special significance. In fact, when the Paris Accord was signed, President Obama had played a very critical role in pushing it forward. It's obviously a very important agenda of the Democrat Party. So one Democrat pushed it and signed it. Now another Democrat has made it possible that we can move forward. Today, United States may not be the biggest emitter, but still a very important player. And therefore, US joining now shows that probably we can really move forward beyond just signing ceremonies and photo opportunities. We must take stock of the long journey that UNFCCC has done over the last few decades. As Professor pointed out, Kyoto needs to be evaluated very carefully to understand why it didn't accomplish what it needed to be accomplished. And we must learn the right lesson from Kyoto as well. That was an important landmark protocol. While we do all that, it's also very important that we must find out, when we move forward, how do you keep in mind the reality of today's world? Today, the biggest emitter is not United States, but China has emerged as the biggest emitter. The second element is the countries which have suffered from climate change and the effects of that has suffered immensely. One of the very principal element of UNFCCC and then also subsequently Kyoto Protocol and also to some extent Paris Accord is that we must realize and accept that the world is not equal. There are some people who have contributed to climate change, and there are many others who have suffered the ill effects of climate change. The sufferers are suffering even more today since we agreed to have the first convention, UNFCCC. Because during the course of last few decades, the emissions have gone up, the sufferings have increased, the losses have ballooned. And therefore, we talk about today's world, we must now take quick action. And it has been pointed out many times before that a delayed action is going to cost us more to repair the planet. And after some time, if you reach the tipping point, then probably even repairing may not be possible. So today we must focus on the instrumentalities which Professor pointed out to work on this. One part of these instrumentalities, and I think largely, how to reduce emissions. Obviously, this has to be the principal focus. Because on one side, if you keep increasing the emissions, that means the temperature will keep rising and the damage will be immense. So first, you must put stop on emissions for sure. And therefore, the measures that are required to stop further emissions have to be done in whatever manner possible. This heterogeneous idea is a very good idea. We can actually use the Paris Accord and use the key elements of that to make it happen. And we must do that. While we do that, we must also keep in mind a very important element and a reality of today is that because of past emissions, historical emissions, which are now increasing and increased over the last 3 decades more than before, the adaptation has become very essential. And this whole debate about climate change, we must focus on mitigation for sure, because if you don't put mitigation, then probably even action may not be sufficient on any other count. But because of historical emissions and because of the reality today, and because of the huge continuing suffering of the people and the losses suffered by various economies, particularly in the developing countries, we must find out ways of adapting to climate change. And adaptation has to be a very key element. So when we talk about instruments, can you not think about instruments for adaptation? How do you work on adaptation as a principal driver for a climate change agenda for future? Without, of course, in any way ignoring the reality that mitigation is a must. Absolutely. But we cannot just focus on mitigation and forget adaptation. And for adaptation, the countries have a huge challenge. In fact, as has been pointed out by several studies, the adaptation may be even more necessary in that part of the world which was not responsible for the emissions to begin with. And therefore, those economies, we didn't have emission, obviously because there was no industrialization, because there was no growth. Because there was no growth, the economies were smaller. And because the economies were smaller, the adaptation ability is also limited. And they are not caused for the damage that has been caused to them. If they are not responsible and still they have to pay for it, there has to be a methodology which was accepted under UNFCCC and also the Kyoto Protocol. So how do you now make that reality a focus and also the priority for the future course of action on climate change under Paris Accord? This is a question, and this is a very important question. We are discussing this in the context of COVID. And we are wondering, how do you deal with this challenge of dealing with climate change post-COVID? This is unfortunate that the whole world suffered. Economies are contracted. People have lost jobs. More people have been pushed into poverty than before. But that's an economic poverty. But I can see a clear danger of people being pushed into poverty because of climate change. And that reality has to be also factored in, because on one hand, the economies are contracted, so their ability to deal with climate change issues are also now becoming a little more challenging. At the same time, we have to deal with another economic issue, that is poverty and economic growth. While we do that, how do you bring in climate change into focus? This is possible, of course, if you can integrate climate change and economic development policies together. And in my opinion, this should be done. Like, for example, changing energy mix of the world and investing more into renewable energy resources in future rather than fossil fuel-based energy deployment. That will ensure that economic growth will happen because infrastructure is getting created, at the same time will not add to emissions anymore. But while we do all this, how do you find out a mechanism which allowed under the Kyoto Protocol clean development mechanism? How do you ensure that what we agreed, even way back in Copenhagen, that will bring more resources on table to compensate for the developing world? So financing is going to be a very critical issue. And the challenge is financing on part of public financing is going to be difficult because governments are under severe debt. I understand. But at the same time, not giving for financing a priority will be pushing ourselves into a very perilous situation. So financing has to be one of the very important issues. And for financing, we have to find out, along with public finances, how to get private finance on board. Can you integrate both? It's also possible. And you talked about heterogeneous instruments. some instruments must be devised and developed to make that happen. Countries which are obliged to give money and the private sector which has the ability to put in money and the markets where it all should happen must have the appetite to accept those instruments. And the countries which need that money the most should be able to receive them in such a manner, in a most efficient way that they can actually deploy those resources and actually deal with climate change issues, both for adaptation and mitigation at the same time. Technology will play a key role. And one of the instrumentality that we talked about should also be focusing along with financing. How can we deal with these issues with technology? We are very fortunate that way that when we signed UNFCCC many decades ago, the new technological tools that we are available today were not even known that time. We could not even foresee them. But today we can actually use even technologies which can actually help us to get over climate change in a very efficient and significant way. But these technologies are not available to everybody. In case of Corona, we have been discussing that how can we bring and try to put a little bit, look at it differently, the TRIPS mechanism under the intellectual property rights to deal with new vaccine development. Can you not think about deployment and development of technologies to deal with climate change by agreeing some framework as to how can we develop them quickly using some other building blocks of technology that are available, whether it's artificial intelligence or others. We have those. So using that for achieving a little larger goal of reducing emission, it's all possible if we can work together. And therefore, global cooperation is necessary. And again, for that, some sort of instruments may be required. And therefore, I welcome the idea of this heterogeneous instrument that Professor talked about. But you can use instruments, financial, technological, and others. But we must keep in mind one important aspect, that the world is not equal. The situation that we are in today due to climate change is caused not by all people in the world. Not all countries are responsible for this. Those who are responsible must have the obligation to fulfill their responsibilities. Those who are sufferers must get it properly compensated, as well as there must be some bridge that must be built between those countries who have ability to correct it and also responsibility to do it, and those who are suffering must be able to work together. And such type of new platforms need to be created. Paris Accord is a very welcome step forward. Overall objective should always be kept in mind that we should not allow the temperature to rise beyond a particular level, 2%, 1.5% degrees centigrade, or 2 degrees centigrade or 1.5. I think even 2 degrees may be too much. But today it seems that we are already on a path to probably, if hope not, to exceed it. And therefore, we must act very quickly. Paris Accord is probably the last chance that we have to act decisively. And that's why I began my remarks by saying that I welcome United States joining back, because it has the ability to bring many people on table. The intentions of the President Biden are nobody doubting them about his sincerity to deal with climate change. And that's a very welcome sign. It's his intent as well as his first decision of appointing Secretary John Kerry as his special envoy. This demonstrates his commitment to move on climate change. So that's something which will help us to realize our objective in a much better manner. So I thank my friend Professor Damodaran for bringing together such distinguished lot of people from different parts of the world to deliberate and discuss the key elements of how to move forward on Paris Accord. I think it's a good idea that we forget the discord and work on accord. But we have a poor record because in the past, we always agree on right things, but never move in the right direction. And therefore, now I think is the time where we should now move forward on accord and achieve something which is in the larger interest of the whole world. So let me once again thank all of you for bringing together on the same screen, on the same platform, but I hope we'll be part of the one world soon. That's very important because we are all in the same ship. Some are on the upper deck, some are in the bottom, but the planet is only one. So therefore, who are on the top should not think that they are going to be having some sort of immunity because there is no vaccine that is going to prevent us from climate change. And therefore, we have to work together and address these challenges together without doing finger pointing. We are not going to say that you are responsible. That's the history, but that's a reality. We have to accept the reality because history cannot be changed. But at the same time, we can change the future together. That is what is important. Let's work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prabhu. It is very nice of you that to have addressed this issue of the balance between adaptation and mitigation. Just one question from the audience, Nidhi Vyas has a question, which essentially I think you can answer, given your experience as Minister for Environment way back in the 1998 to 2000 when Kyoto Protocol was trying to gain traction at that particular point. You think in Glasgow, before Glasgow, as the Sherpa of the G20 process, and given the fact that G20 countries account for a substantial portion of the CO2 emissions, do you think the G20 can put take up some leadership to ensure that the financial resources about which you talked move from developing countries to developed countries? Do you think some G20 initiatives are possible? This is coming from the floor.
Actually, Professor, G20 is a very important platform to deal with climate change. Though I strongly feel that climate change agreement should be reached under UNFCCC umbrella only. Because the G20 countries may have a little bit pulling power, but I don't think they could take the mandate which is there for all the countries, because there are 20 countries. There are more than 200 countries in the world. And I always maintain in the G20 deliberation that we cannot forget that those who are not in the room, we are responsible for them as well. And therefore, this point is first point. Second point, in my opinion, is that all G20 communiques have always highlighted the importance of climate change. Unfortunately, in 2019 G20, we had a 19+1 communique on climate change. This was the first time ever, because US had a different viewpoint, and therefore we had to accommodate, as of like, I could not say point of dissent, but they had their own formulation, and 19 other countries, except US, everybody else had a similar formulation. So I think this is very important. Another point I would like to mention is that India is the only country in the G20 grouping, which now G20 together, as you know, is 86% of the global GDP. India is the only country which is actually moving forward on track to achieve our commitment, fulfill our commitment, which were given under Paris Accord. So that's something which must be noted, that India, despite all the challenges domestically, despite the fact that we have so many pressing economic issues, that we have moved forward. And therefore, that is something which is a very worthwhile achievement, which must be acknowledged and appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Prabhu, for coming and delivering this nuggets of wisdom. And with this, I think we'll be happy to take up the next issue for a discussion. But before I request you to, before I really I mean, before I conclude, let me ask you one small question which has come from the floor again, which is from Mr. Sharma, Jagmohan Sharma. You mentioned about technologies, the importance of technology transfer. So the question is, if there are second best short technologies, second grade best short technologies, why is it that developed countries can't even get that transfer to developing countries?
Sorry, the technology?
See, not the first rate technologies, the cutting edge technology, maybe the more vintage technologies, which are still effective in backstopping CO2 emissions, can there be a process by which they can be transferred? You know, some money like the Montreal Protocol. You know, we bought all the technologies, put it in a multilateral fund, and then disbursed it to developing countries. Is that possible for climate change? Now, what I mean is not hydrogen. Hydrogen is talked about as the nascent technology for climate change. But we are talking of more basic renewable wind energy and solar energy technologies. Do you think it is possible for countries like India to take the leadership and transfer? We have achieved a lot of progress in that direction. Now, that is a question.
I think, this is a very important question. And I think we should examine all possibilities of addressing this huge challenge in various forms. I was saying from a different perspective that today, particularly since we signed the UNSCC, not the Kyoto Protocol, but even the umbrella agreement, since then we have made a huge progress globally, not all the countries equally, but huge progress in terms of technological deployment. Today's world is driven by technology. And just imagine this one particular program like what we are doing today was not even, we could not have thought about it only a few weeks ago, or a few months ago. And therefore, kind of technologies that we have in store now, or we are using them, not necessarily for climate change. But as you know, any technology platform, you can use the same element of that technology for doing something for addressing a bigger challenge in some other sector. And therefore, I was saying from that perspective that we must have some platform. But I agree with you. We have to do both at the same time. And therefore, I really look forward to technology again as driving. Technology is the cause of climate change anyway, because the industrial revolution started it. So that was also a technology issue. But as we always know, that if you are suffering because of some poison, probably another kind of poison can help you to get over the poison to begin with. So technology is inevitable. We have to use it. We should not just dispense with it. And today's world, we have a possibility of even examining the technology before they are deployed. So we don't have to have an afterthought that this is what I did and then now I have a problem. So I think what we can do is that even create today's, not just for climate change, I'm saying generally, we must have ethical protocol for all technologies of future that will again help us to deal with and to avoid some unknown problem that may arise little later. So I think we should work on that.